before you leave.
If it gets to 12:30,
Can we have your attention?
5-2, just come over.
Thank you, Heidi. I rely on my members for many things. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the March installment of the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Let's do a quick round of introductions. I'll start and then we'll go to my left this time rather than starting from one end. David Fenley, I am the chair of TAAC, and I'll pass it to the left. Go ahead.
Andy Streisick, Metro Mobility.
Patsy Murphy, Precinct C.
Michelle Severson, Minnesota Council on Disability.
Heidi Meyer, Minnesota CCD.
Doug Cook, Metro Transit.
Claudia Fugly, MNCCD.
Carrie Sheldon, Precinct G.
Jeff Danes, Precinct D.
Eric Henriksen, Minnesota Council on Disability.
Patty Thorson, Trellis, or Metro Area Agency on Aging.
Rhoda Chape, Temporary Recording Secretary.
Darrell Paulsen, Vice Chair and Region F, I believe. I've represented so many regions on this committee.
Thank you all very much. I see at least one person online. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself? And then I think we might have, and then go ahead, sir.
Chris Bates, Precinct B.
There we go.
And then do I see Sam on the phone?
Jasmine.
Go ahead, Sam, sorry.
I'm Jasmine, Precinct A, and I don't know how long I'll last today. I have COVID, so I'm not feeling well.
Oh, no. Well, if you have to run, but we do appreciate you making the effort
Well, don't
to
run.
be here.
Don't run. You might slip, but don't run.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for introductions, everyone. Did I miss anybody online? I don't think I did in terms of count, in terms of committee members. Cool. All right, let's move on to approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second by Patsy.
Thank you, Patsy. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. Abstentions, yay. I would also entertain a motion to approve last month's minutes unless folks have changes or questions about it.
So moved.
Thank you, Eric.
Second.
Thank you, Claudia.
And I would just put a thank you out to, I think it was Rachel, right? Isn't that who it was?
Yeah, I think, probably Rachel and
I
Ray
believe,
tag teamed
and it was sad that we had to, she left, but she left to took another job that she had already applied for when she had applied for this job.
Yep,
So
she told me.
she's still doing a little bit of services that we care about. She's just doing them I believe she's doing them for the county.
She said
Yes.
last month was her last one.
Yeah, she did say that. All right, so is there any discussion? We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion on the minutes? All right, everybody who yes.
I don't know where it falls under, but I've noticed the Metro Mobility taxis aren't very, a lot of them aren't very clean and there's been some issues. But then I noticed Metro Mobility tries really hard to keep their vehicles very clean, the big vehicles, small vehicles. And it's not being taken care of, so, and between both of them, they're not, neither a side, Metro here, taxi company, neither. And you can do all the right things, so who do we, or how does it get discussed?
Thank you for that, Heidi. So we can, if you want, you can bring it up during member comment.
Okay.
Right now, it's discussion just on the minutes from last month, if we want changes, if we want to make comments on them. All right, all in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no. Opposed, no. Abstentions, awesome, you all. Thank you so much for being so efficient. Cool, we have what seems to be our annual update from Barry Farrington on bus stop accessibility. Please join us. Welcome back. You've been here quite a few times, so you're a familiar face.
I know St. Paul's getting some.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for having us again. We do try and come here once a year. I'm Barry Farrington. I'm here with Sonja Burseth, so giving you an update on Better Bus Stops. Better Bus Stops is Metro Transit's commitment to customer experience at bus stops. We add shelters, replace shelters, put light and heat in some of them, we maintain them, and we work on making accessibility improvements at bus stops. Next slide, please. These are our program goals. We want to continue to equitably distribute shelters, light and heat across our regular route bus network. We want to focus on accessibility in particular where we have shelters. We want to increase the availability of accessible bus stops, whether it's a Metro Transit-led construction project or partnering with someone else's construction project. And in support of Metro Transit Safety and Security Action Plan, we're working on adding lighting at shelters. This slide includes a photo of what we want an accessible bus stop to be like. There's a paved area at the bus stop sign connected to the sidewalk. Next slide. And as a reminder of what makes an accessible bus stop in terms of ADA, firm, stable surface, minimum 5 feet by 8 feet, cross slope that is not greater than 2.1%. It should connect to whatever available pedestrian path exists, and it should be clear of obstructions. So this is a graphic of an accessible bus stop, and we use this to communicate, in particular to partners, what that looks like. And Sonja will be talking more about our partner guidance. Next slide. So we're going to first review what we got done last year, and then I want to talk about two things that we're just getting going, a bus stop accessibility 5-year capital plan, and then a review of our shelter placement guidelines. That's how we prioritize across our system where we would want to place shelters. And then fourth is our design guide that Sonja will talk more about. It's been published in the past, but it was recently updated. Next slide. So in 2023, we added shelters at 19 bus stops that didn't have them previously. We replaced 25 shelters that had reached the end of their useful life or were, planned to be replaced. Then we, in partnership with our roadway authority partners, such as counties or MnDOT, cities, 82 accessible bus stops were built across the system. And then we added lighter heat to 4 shelters. This is in addition to shelters that you may have experienced on East Lake Street, Marshall Avenue, Selby Avenue. This is where the B-Line arterial BRT will begin service next year. Those enhanced shelters were constructed and are now open for customers to use on the regular Route 21. And this slide includes a photo of a concrete pad at a bus stop. The concrete is still wet, and it's going to dry and be a good place for getting on and off the bus. Next slide. So I talked about shelters. When we put out bus shelters, it also means Metro Transit is maintaining those shelters. So we just wanted to note that includes a regular visit to pick up litter, do some basic cleaning. It can involve, a once-a-week visit or more if it's a very busy place. It involves clearing snow at bus stops when we have snow. I should say clearing snow at bus stops in the shelter area, and that's at stops that have shelters. And then this last bullet is the wrong URL. I apologize, and I want to ask your secretary if I can get the correct URL in the minutes later, email it to you. But we have a new comment form that allows people to more easily take a picture of an issue. If you see something that's in disrepair or and there's an image on the slide showing someone cleaning off graffiti, you can report that online. And the new URL, I'll get it in writing, but it's metrotransit.org/cleanliness-facilities-form. And there's QR codes at stations that go to that spot online. Next slide. Also in 2023, we've continued a practice of trying pilot projects, just testing out new things, see what works. We've had artwork on shelter glass as a way to test, does that reduce vandalism, and a couple years in, we're seeing, yes, it's reduced glass breakage and graffiti by about 50%. So we'll continue to expand that. We have solar lights in shelters, and we have a newer system that puts a solar panel on the roof of the shelter. That's going well, and we're going to expand its use this coming year. And then new for 2023, we just started this, so evaluation is still out, but we have a polycarbonate material, which is functions like glass. It's very durable. It doesn't break like glass breaks. So it's fully transparent. There's a photo on this slide of a regular bus shelter that actually has polycarbonate in it, but when you're out there in person, you really can't tell that it's not glass. Next slide. So the next two bits are things we're just starting up this year. One is a bus stop accessibility 5-year capital plan. And what we do now, and in the past, I guess I should say, is we've made a list year by year. What bus stops do we want to make accessibility improvements to? Design, construct, and then pull up another year's worth of work. So we're aiming, to, instead of going year by year, to have a 5-year list of bus stops that we can continually design, construct, and make progress that way. It's just, the other part I wanted to mention is in the past, our goal has been 30 bus stops a year, and now we're aiming for 60 bus stops a year for making accessibility improvements. So I wanted to highlight here just like 3 categories of information we're using to fill out this 5-year capital plan. We're just in like a data analysis spot right now with the work just getting started. But first, it's looking at ridership focused, people focused things, like where are people getting on and off the bus, and where are people with a mobility fare paying, and what bus stops are buses deploying their ramp. So that's one way to prioritize. Then the next bucket is just that we want to confirm that that bus service is going to continue to operate on that street and that the bus stop is in the best possible location. We want to construct something that's, we can't move it, or we could move it, but we have to tear it up and build it again. And then the last is just construction considerations, like often Metro Transit can come in and build that concrete pad between a sidewalk and a curb. Sometimes that could also include a pedestrian ramp or a short sidewalk segment. Sometimes the project could be better accomplished through a greater roadway reconstruction project. So we coordinate on things like that with the roadway authority, the city or county. Next slide. The other initiative we are gearing up to do is to relook at our shelter placement guidelines, and this is how we prioritize what bus stops should be considered for adding bus shelters. So currently we look for at least 30 average daily boardings to then consider if it's a good place for a shelter, if the site works. We also consider factors like, is it a transit transfer point? Is it near housing for people with disabilities or older adults? There's other kind of prioritization criteria once it meets that minimum ridership threshold. So this year we want to relook at those guidelines because we've had 3 major forces of change occurring. One is that metro arterial BRT, such as the D line. We have this rapid expansion, I would call it rapid, where those lines are replacing our regular bus service and stations. Customers are moving to these stations that are always accessible, always have a shelter. So we just, in our world of providing amenities for people at bus stops, we just need to work that into our plan. The second thing is we have a better understanding of what is going on with our travel patterns in this kind of post-pandemic system. Metro Transit is working on a service plan called Network Now that's going to come out in a draft later this summer. We want to get our bus stop facilities aligned with the plan. And then third, in 2023, the legislator adopted, there's new legislation that says invest in bus stop accessibility, invest in transit shelters, replacing shelters. So we have our sales tax. We just need to look at how do we use that resource well? So that's something we will, more to come on this part, but it's getting started. Next slide. Sonja.
Thank you. We updated our regular route bus stop design guide, which was originally published in 2021. The guide covers on-street bus stop design to help roadway authorities, developers, technical staff, and community members to partner with us to create great bus stops. We wanted to publish a document that roadway authorities, so like cities, counties, MnDOT, can reference in their reconstruction projects, since our bus stops often live in that public space that's controlled by others. But we see bus stop design as an important partnership building work, since we're often working within another agency's project scope. I'll just note quickly that like ABRT and rail are covered by different guidelines, so this is really focusing on that regular route service that's typically on street. The design guide covers many topics, but a few that might be important to this group include bus stop design in different roadway contexts, bus stop design on streets where no sidewalk is provided, and bus stops and bike facilities. At the right is an image of a bus stop on Lyndale Avenue South in Minneapolis with a shelter. The bus stop has a clear, firm, and stable surface as the accessible boarding area, outlined in red, which is then connected to that pedestrian access route on the sidewalk. The shelter is oriented back to street between the front door and the back door areas, and the back door area is also paved and clear of obstructions for people getting off the bus. Next slide, please. Metro Transit operates service in a variety of contexts. This includes on roadways where no sidewalk is provided by the roadway authority, which presents some challenges. But when citing a bus stop, Metro Transit staff consider a variety of factors: nearby destinations, potential rider origins, roadway design, so like the posted speed, number of lanes, available right-of-way, the existing pedestrian infrastructure, like the presence of a sidewalk or trail, as well as planned pedestrian infrastructure, as well as bus operations. So while best practices, would have a fully accessible pedestrian network, we've heard that incremental solutions can provide value to transit riders before a roadway authority builds a full sidewalk. So one example of an incremental solution includes the image on the right, which shows a roadway with a curb. To site the bus stop, Metro Transit installed an accessible boarding area, a PAR, a pedestrian access route connecting to the curb ramp, which then connects to an existing sidewalk across the street, which is outside of that image. So there's also guidance for adding a street-level bus stop pad outside of the roadway and travel lanes, and that improvement would be for roadways without curb or gutter. Next slide, please. We're looking for input and feedback from this group for future topics to be researched and developed for a future design guide update. Some topics on the list include the new public right-of-way accessibility guidance, or new ProWAG, bus stop design at roundabouts and on 3-lane roadways, temporary bus stops due to construction projects, and then to discuss this one novel solution to a narrow sidewalk in this example at the picture on the right, where we wanted to hear how you would experience this bus stop. So at the image on the right, there was an existing sidewalk with the curb, with no boulevard, and the sidewalk is 7 feet deep there. Behind the sidewalk is a grassy slope uphill to private property, and Metro Transit added a concrete pad behind that walk where you can see it's a little bit lighter, which is 3.5 feet deep by 5 feet wide. So the 3.5 foot depth extends the edge of the right-of-way. Because of the slope behind the sidewalk, there's a short V-curb or mini retaining wall at the backs and sides of the pad. And the pad combined with the sidewalk provides over 10 feet of depth, exceeding the 8-foot minimum. Next slide, please. So other discussion questions that I just like to pose to this group. What other information should be used to prioritize bus stops for 5-year accessibility improvements? What other additional topics are important for a future bus stop design guide update? And I guess what information would you like to see regularly brought back to TAAC?
Next slide. Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
was short and sweet.
Thank you very much. It was a lot of very good information, too. I have a couple questions. I'm sure some of you all do, too. Fantastic. So the numbers of improvements in 2023, how's that comparable to previous years? Is it y'all shoot for the same numbers pretty much within reason?
Yeah, our chair and members of the committee, our goal has been to add 20 shelters a year and replace 20 to 25 shelters depending, and add 30 boarding pads. So this year we really exceeded the boarding pad goal. Last year we didn't meet our boarding pad goal, and it just has to do with like the season of design and construction. There was work that we would have hoped to construct last year, and then it moved into the spring. The other reason that number is high is like half of that is Metro Transit led, and the other half is in partnership with the Roadway Authority, where Metro Transit has advised on the design, and we've gotten a benefit out of the road project.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Heidi, go ahead.
My question, I have a couple, but one is West St. Paul and I was really proud because I was going to report it, but then they decided to clean. Is the new glass that you're using, is it easy to clean? Because we got spray painted, graffiti, maybe gang related, we don't know. But it had those kind of symbols, and if you get stickers and whatever, because I've seen everything, food, everything. Is it easy to clean those new glass, when those occur, and if they do get kind of smashed, like it wants a separate, because I've actually seen one where someone got angry at our bus stop and it just slowly broke it, but it was on a Saturday, so you don't come out until Monday to fix it. So is there ways that, you guys can, because it might really work, the new glass, but can it handle what we've seen already in the community?
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for that question. That is something we are evaluating because products have trade-offs. This is very durable. To be like smashing it and having it break isn't going to happen, but it may be easier to like mar, to scratch it.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of cleaning off graffiti and stickers, our maintenance department is testing different kind of cleaning products, but those are the questions that our cleaning group has. And so there's that trade-off. You don't get it broken, but if it doesn't look good due to graffiti.
And just be careful when, because I've seen this at different bus stops and the train area, where they will carve into it in a way that now it's got inappropriate stuff. So you got to keep that in mind. Where we have, and then you're cleaning up a whole different kind of mess. And then the other thing is, I like the idea that you talked about where you get dropped off and there's this neat cement thing, but your sign is a little further down, and sometimes bus drivers go right next to the sign and not next to what you just advertised, saying, this is a great option, and I could stand here in this cement area, but I have to be picked up, So, and then the one other thing is when winter comes, and some of your ideas, because when I take the 54 and there's the the restaurant before you go to the Mall of America, it's Mickey's Diner. There's a bus stop there, and it's in the middle of like grass and stuff, and I have to cross the highway, and stuff. So those little ideas that you're coming up with to identify certain things might not work in the wintertime or might not work in certain weather, when things blow around and get bad, and then your idea gets kind of lost. So think about that, because there's bus stops where all it is just grass and a little bit of area, and then you have to, it's none of what you were talking about, and it is considered a bus stop. You guys made it a bus stop. So just keep that in mind when you're building, because you're making it like, oh, it's great, but you're not thinking about all the different weather that can kill it. And then I can't use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. We have some more questions, but a quick reminder to members to allow folks to finish speaking before following up with questions. I think I saw Patty next, then Claudia.
Okay. I'm wondering, when you decide to, you talked about the list of bus stops. one factor that I would ask about is if you have a bus stop on one side of the street, is the corresponding bus stop on the other side of the street accessible as well, such that a person, let's say I use a wheelchair most times, can both go one direction on that bus route, but then also come back to the same destination, because that's an issue that I think gets lost. I don't know if that changes on a boulevard. I live on an express route, and so it's a frontage road. And so one side of the street is, I could go from Minnetonka to downtown Minneapolis, fine, but I couldn't come back. So I guess I'm wondering if that's a part of when you do evaluate bus stops, does that come into, or is that something that could be added to the criteria you make?
I back her up.
Chair and members of the
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
committee, that's excellent feedback. We should do that. I mean, I think we would look to the data to think, 20 people are getting on here, 20 people are getting off here, but that might not be showing up in the data. But what you say makes great sense in terms of the pair of stops being your return trip.
Right, yeah, just the unit of service that you, yeah.
Just to paraphrase so I understand, so what you're saying is, why should not the bus stops, corresponding bus stops on one side of the street to the other be done in pairs as opposed to maybe make one accessible to the other? Because there's an assumption that person's gonna obviously do a return trip.
Hopefully come back.
Okay.
I mean, I'd like to come back home when I go somewhere.
Yeah,
I
perfect.
got no what St. Paul, because I do that all the time to come to St. Paul.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood what was going on.
Oh,
Okay.
I got it because I do it every day.
I hope.
Yeah.
All right, who did I have next? Claudia.
I have a couple of suggestions. One of them, basically the downtown Minneapolis, St. Paul area, when the buses come and the ramps are down, you have your bench or your shelter. There's not enough room on the sidewalk for me to let the driver know I'm there. And then there's an opening between the shelter and this post that you have that tells you the times.
Mm-hmm.
There's not enough room for that ramp to come and me coming up there to the ramp, so the driver misses me. So the driver needs to figure out a way, or we need to figure out a way, where the ramp can go that's going to be easy for everybody. Because once I try and get there, everybody is in front of me, and the driver doesn't see me. So he doesn't realize I have to have a ramp. So when I finally, I've had to hit the bus a couple of times to let him know that I'm there. And he's not happy because he has to stop the bus. And neither are any of the passengers. So that's a suggestion there. The other suggestion I have is, there are times where I've been taking off on the ramp or a lift on a bus, and when I get down, I'm on the grass. I'm not on the sidewalk, I'm on the grass. I've called the company to say, can you move the bus stop? No, we can't. We've had the people out there checking it out. It's where it should be. It's right next to the stoplight. We can't move it. When I get off that bus, I'm either on the grass or I'm somewhere where I can't get out, and I have to have the driver help me out. And that delays that whole route. So wherever the bus stops are, we need to figure out who can we call to make sure that this gets done so that I'm not on the grass or gravel when I get down on the ground. So thank you.
I'm going to jump in real quick because it sounds like we have multiple things going on here. I think the majority of your comments were driver related, like where they're stopping, they're not seeing you necessarily. I think actually the new form that you all have might be a really good way to identify the specific stops where you have access issues, where you can't be seen or where there maybe isn't a pad and there should be because you're using it as a wheelchair user. Is that what I'm kind of getting from your comments, Claudia?
It's drivers, and it's also the how you get on a ramp. Because if you have the bus shelter, or you have a bench, and then you have the post that tells you what time the buses come. So that's a little bit of, spot there. So between that spot, if they bring the ramp down, that's where they're bringing it.
Right, that's where they're supposed to bring it.
So that they don't move beyond the post, or they don't move before the bench or shelter.
Okay.
So it might be driver, it might be the shelter.
Are you saying there's not enough space there, or
Yeah,
are you
there's not
saying,
enough space.
are you saying that they don't drop it there every time that they're supposed to drop it there?
When they drop it, right, evidently, that's where they're told to
Right, they're
drop
supposed
it.
to drop it. They're supposed to drop it at the sign. When they come up to the stop, they're supposed to stop at the bus sign, and that's where they'll deploy that lift, right there.
Yeah, but that,
They're
I know
not
what
supposed
she's
to move
talking
beyond
about.
that sign.
The best ones to take a look at would be down there by the old Dayton store.
Yeah, they haven't changed those.
Down by that area, that would be a good place for you to take a look and see what I'm talking about.
it's the same thing if you have a physical disability and you're trying to get off the bus.
Well, yeah, because if,
All right, we're gonna reel this back in here. I think I saw Doug look into, I know we're off scope here because this is not a discussion about bus drivers, but I think there's a little bit of a merging of issues here.
I know.
Hold on one second, Heidi. Doug, did I see you had your hand up and you wanted to say something, or can you?
Oh, I was just gonna
Okay.
agree with Darrell
Okay.
that, they're supposed to pull up to the sign. There should be enough room there to drop the ramp unless we get alerted and we're gonna have to put a pad in to address your issue. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And sometimes it is pretty narrow there. So maybe potentially moving that shelter a little farther to the side because, that's how usually it works.
Yeah, because if we can't alert the driver that we're there,
well,
they're not gonna see us because there's so many people
right, they all-
trying to get on a bus. And we're only 4 or 5 feet off the ground.
Good point.
Thank you, Claudia. Did you have a response? I think that might bleed into, I had some more in-depth questions about the form, but that might not be for today. But I am curious about that form. Did you have a response at all?
To this comment here?
Yes.
Yes, Chair, members of the committee. This is good information. I'm hearing that because of the number of people approaching the bus stop, you're not able to approach close enough that the driver understands that you're there. And with the shelter where it is, there's a lack of a good sight line. So I think there's a combination of urban design issues that we can help with. And then even if the operator is putting the ramp in the exact right spot, there's still maybe an urban design challenge. Was it the St. Paul Dayton's one or the Minneapolis?
This one's Minneapolis, and there's a
Okay.
couple also in St. Paul that I've seen that happen.
I like the idea of using the form to help us find these locations. Sometimes it is, it could be too close, the sign and the shelter, so I appreciate that.
And can you not only think about wheelchairs, but people like me who have physical disability? Because I've been in her situation where I have to figure out how to get off the bus correctly, and then you didn't give me all the space in the world to do it. And then I have to redesign how I do my disability, not just wheelchairs, scooters, and walkers.
Thank you, Heidi. Did you have a follow-up on this or a new question?
It's actually kind of a follow-up.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want, so you're going to be sending a new link to that form? Because what I suggest for everybody is to send you pictures, because I've got pictures. and I can send you all of what I have. That's all
Yeah. We'll get, I'll compose an email to members with the proper form and and a little bit of instructions on that. I'm sure you have, some instructions on that. It sounds like a really cool resource where we can start officially uploading location data, visual data. So y'all can take that into consideration. I wanna, before I get second questions from folks, I wanna go around and make sure that everybody has a chance to at least say one thing. Doug, technical expertise here, you wanna chime
One thing
in?
that sparked in my head is why do we put the actual bus stop sign after the shelter? Why don't we put it before it? That way it would be a clear view for the driver coming through. It's just a matter of moving left or right.
Good job.
Okay. I had Eric. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, I just wanted to say to you, Sonja and Barry, thank you for these efforts. This is where I feel rubber meets the road, where actually you're seeing improvements, you're building out a 5-year CIP, and that's not necessarily a straightforward, easy thing to do, and you're finding the opportunities to invest in this accessibility issue in our transit system. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Kind of going to rifle through some of the questions and comments I have, but you asked for some input when you come back to TAAC. This is a great topic, I think. It ties well into our work plan as well for looking at the progress we're making. You provided a lot of these numbers that were some accomplishments in 2023 or metrics, but there's not a lot for us to compare to. You illustrated you had a success this year of going above and beyond. So, we want to celebrate your successes, but if we have some more comparatives, we can also look at where the opportunities lie, where maybe we're just not meeting some of the goals. And I think that kind of would help highlight, again, those opportunities. So that would be a suggestion for when you guys do return on this topic. Another comment on the form, it's a very lengthy address. Someone's going to have to type it out, go find it. I don't want to say it's onerous. It's good that we have a form, but one software that I would implore you to at least consider or start talking about might be something like a C-click fix. I know other cities that we operate in, so Minneapolis, I think even maybe St. Paul, but there's other cities that are starting to take off with that software. It's very simple, it's fairly easy to use, and it kind of does the same thing that I think your form would. And then there might be even some integration that you could then work with cities, because I'm sure cities get complaints and they're like, well, this isn't our system, and they close the case, but it might be a way to help introduce some synergy between you guys. Regarding your 5-year plan, do you lean into the ADA transition plan or some of the studies? It was a couple years ago, we had a representative here that looked into that. So that's an open question, I guess.
Chair and members of the committee, we do have these bus stop improvements feed into the Met Council ADA transition plan. So we can report our achievements every year, and it should roll up into the report on the council ADA transition plan. Is that what you're?
Well, so to be a little more specific, when you're looking at your 5-year CIP build-out, do you use the ADA transition plan and the identified improvements they found where there's lacking, there's barriers, or there's other things that need to happen, and you use that as another priority or another, placement in your matrix? Because you kind of identified, I think, some really good ways of identifying, like, well, where is the need the most to make these probably limited funding. The ADA transition plan went out and did all that essentially. So there's just a tool for you to utilize. And I just was curious if that's yet or maybe to be implemented.
Chair and members of the committee, the ADA transition plan did include site-specific assessments of barriers for park and rides, transit centers, and Metro Council, Metro Transit facilities, like buildings, but it did not do bus stop by bus stop evaluations. So that's something we're working on in tandem with the development of the 5-year CIP. We're going out and collecting data, understanding deficiencies, programming improvements.
Okay, I'm not going to try to take up everyone's time, but I just have a couple more. It goes back to some of the questions you had about the design guide and like, hey, we want your guys' input. This is the forum. I think we've provided some good insight here, but I don't know how to do this, or I'd implore our committee members as well. I think we need more time, and I think we do want to be more involved, and I don't want to form a task group or anything like that, but maybe a decent work session with you and some volunteers from this committee and even other people within the ADA community, because we can kind of think of an experience we've had and give you one input, but the design guide is going to be a great mechanism that all your engineers, all your designers are going to start to use. And if we can really try to give you our input in that, I think we would appreciate, I would hope, the opportunity to meet with you and get a little more into the details. I have a lot of things just from some of the pictures you showed about, how is that maintained? There's other, things and considerations I can think of from engineering standpoints, maintenance, et cetera. But I think our committee members too here have, they, live it, breathe it every day. So there's just those little things that maybe we're not thinking of if they're not involved. So I appreciate you reaching out and saying, hey, we're looking for your input, but in the span of 30 minutes is very difficult to, I think, get a good, complete recommendation for the design guidelines. So I don't know if that's a motion we need to approve or what, but maybe offline we can coordinate and get something together where we can sit down and talk about that. My last real quick question, do we really have bus stops at roundabouts?
Yes, Chair and committee members. We do have bus stops at roundabouts. Typically, they would be before the roundabout, so not inside the circle per se, as you're pointing out. And thank you for all these great ideas. I think, as you say, a work session just to tap on the expertise in this room would be really great to get into some of those details. So we'll think more about that.
Excellent, thank you.
Jeff, go ahead.
Just a question on you mentioned working with cities and counties. Probably when they redo roads, there's some input, but how do you work with them, and do you get funding from any of the cities or counties?
Would you talk about working?
Yeah. To the chair and members of the committee, thank you for that question. We do work really hard to maintain good professional relationships just with engineers, planners at the cities and counties. We typically rely on them to reach out to us to let us know, like, a project is starting, it's at 0%, we're planning. And then we request to continue on like their project management team or their TAAC, Technical Advisory Committee, where we just come in at 0% design, 30% design, 60 and 100, just kind of maintaining those touch points as the project goes from a vision or a concept all the way to like very engineered, detailed measurements. So we try to comment on their plans at each step and make sure that all of our pieces of the bus stop sign, as so many of you have pointed out, we consider the anchor of the bus stop zone. So making sure to get that right, and all those other pieces then can fall into place according to their plan.
So I'm wondering too, my precinct, I'm in the Roseville area, there's a lot more senior housing being built, complexes. How do you work in regards to being alerted to that? Because I've heard people say that access to the bus sites are really poor in those areas. And seniors are concerned about that, their ability to get on and off buses, so.
Yeah, one way we think about that is getting our interdepartmental groups together. So folks from like our street operations team who spend a lot of time out in the field, folks from our route planning team, and we talk about like what are the destinations here? Where are people coming from? Large apartment complexes, as you say, senior housing. Are there any like rehabilitation or healthcare facilities? So we try to bring that level of precision and sensitivity to folks that might be using like a mobility device or living with another disability in our design and our prioritization process.
And if I could just add, the design guide is on our website, and we do actively share it with cities as they work with developers. So you could always encourage a resident of a building to say, hey, ask your city to look at Metro Transit's design guide, and they could include a good bus stop design in their development design.
Thank you. Chris, you are in the queue. Did you have a follow-up to that, Patty?
Yeah, in terms of network, I live in a senior living community in Minnetonka. And I've thought for a number of years, wondering whether there's any outreach done by you and your colleagues with, let's say, executive directors of senior living communities, or I think that would, or sales and outreach people. The executive director would probably be able to route it to somebody, but, because I think that might help broaden an awareness of what services Metro Transit offers that they're not aware of. I applaud you in what you're doing, too. It's exciting.
Thank you.
Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a quick question. I want to go back to the 2023 pilot projects, and I think they're great because, for especially the solar lights for safety reasons. I'm just wondering, have you figured out what the cost savings is when you implemented the solar lights versus how you did doing things otherwise, and the alternative to glass? Because those resources, if we're saving money in those resources, they can be used in other things that make us more accessible on Metro Transit.
Chair and members of the committee, we are looking at the financial piece. Let me see if I can come up with the numbers I want to share. For one thing, when we make an electrical connection, the cost of that, like a traditional hardwire electrical connection to Excel or sometimes to a street light, the cost can depend on how far that source of power is to the shelter. So we don't have a set, unit cost of what it is to add power. But the solar is, it is much less money per unit, no matter what, I would say. I think it's about a quarter of the cost. I'm going to look at my colleague in the audience. Paul, do you want to just come up and talk about this? Thank you, if that's okay.
Oh, please.
Okay.
It's always nice to have.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and committee members. I'm Paul Lamb. I'm with the Engineering and Facilities Group at Metro Transit. I'm working on some of the capital improvements that Barry talked about. And for the solar lighting, the technology has changed several times over the years, but currently we have a contract where we're installing them for about $4,000 per unit. And regarding what Barry said about the hardwired underground electrical connections, it did vary. It could be somewhere between $4,000 and $15,000, depending on the source of power and the distance. Sometimes, if it was a very far source of power, and we'd also be installing heat, for example, it could be $25,000 to $30,000 just for the electrical connection.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. So not only is it the cheapest, it's also the most efficient. Perfect. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to go to Andy, and then I'll come to Patsy, and then Heidi.
Nope, then you're going to come to me, and then you're going to go to Patsy.
Thanks, guys. I just have three real quick questions. You mentioned tracking the L tags to prioritize bus stops, if I understood correctly, the limited mobility tags. In that process, are you also tracking the manual keys for service-connected disability passengers and the new fare type for Metro Mobility riders to ride for free, or are those truly just Ls?
The second thing you mentioned, is that the cash option for the mobility fare?
No, it's the manual entry that, I'm sorry, the second thing I mentioned was because during the pilot now, Metro Mobility customers are riding for free on fixed route, there is a new fare product that Kevin Davis developed that it's essentially a blank pass that allows Metro Mobility certified riders to tag and ride for free, but it won't show up as an L transactions, so just wanted to make sure that you're getting that in to count those transactions, and also manual keys for anybody who's boarding for free as a rider with a service-connected disability.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you. I don't know that we are capturing that, and we should, so thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Second one quick on snow removal and maintenance. I was struck by like that slide you had for the one on like London, where it's the new non-sidewalk, so an entirely new responsibility. Are we confident that we have enough maintenance staff to be able to handle the responsibilities for maintaining the accessibility of these new improvements at the stops?
Chair and members of the committee, I'm going to be frank and say, no, I don't know that we have the maintenance staff to do that. We have a list of bus stops that we, depending on the snow event, if staff are available, we'll go clear them. That's very different than saying I'm confident we can clear them. I think as an agency, we face this tension point of, do we leave the bus stop, next to a curb in the road all year round? Do we build this facility that lets you get out of the road when it's not snowy, or as was mentioned before, those cases where the vegetation can also creep in by Mickey's Diner? Those are tough questions. I appreciate you raising the point.
So yeah, I think just for official feedback, probably from this committee, we would argue that, the initial investment in infrastructure is good, but that the essential element in maintaining accessibility for all sites is to be adequately staffed in a way that allows people to go out and clear sites when there are barriers that occur, whether it's snow or vegetation or what have you. And then my last one, I've been hearing for a while now from ambulatory members of the disability community that at least the perception is that, when Metro Transit kind of moved away from benches to go with the leaning rail and then jettisoned the leaning rail, that maybe to deal with complications around people who are experiencing homelessness, that we never went back to benches at a level that is appropriate. So again, if that is the case, if that does reflect reality, looking at accessibility, not just with regard to accessible path of travel for folks using mobility devices or things of that nature, and also folks who might need to sit down if they're waiting on those, and revisiting benches. The people with whom I speak are much more comfortable asking somebody who might be sleeping on a bench to move than they are either having to stand for a while or just not take a trip because they know they're not going to be able to stand for the 20 minutes that it might be required.
Or half an hour.
I like that.
Thank you.
Thank you for those
Good
comments.
observation.
Thank you, Andy. I'm actually going to go to Darrell first and then hit this side of the room.
A couple things I would like to say, and I also want to thank you both for being here. And I mean, it's nice to have you in the room. It's nice to have us at the table. But the biggest thing I've heard you say is, we're fixing lighting, we're fixing pathways, we're putting in 25 new accessible pads all the time. But when I ride the system, when I look at the system, we're not talking about looking at the receptacles. We're not talking about making sure that the heating elements are placed in an appropriate place where the heat is evenly distributed to folks that have circulation issues or they have issues relating to cold and hot sensitivity issues. So, I mean, when you talk about safety in relationship to lighting and stuff like that, because I tell people all the time, if you put a trash can next to something and you light it up and you give the perception that you want it to be clean there, eventually that place is going to be clean. So if you give the perception that we're going to be safe and we're going to be able to ride this throughout the whole year, even in the wintertime, then I need to be able to have heat in that space. And we have an issue. Those heaters cannot be placed in locations where they cannot be vandalized. So what do? How do we cover them in such a way so that they don't get vandalized, but yet still let the heat through? I mean, that's always been an ongoing issue, but as long as you're creating new bus stops and replacing old ones, that should be priority number one. I know we've had an easy winter this time, so we should have been spending the time this winter developing those relationships, those partnerships that you talk about with municipalities. When you talk about bus stops in general, you maintain about 400 to 500 bus stops. We have about 12,000 bus stops in our system. So that's a drop in the bucket compared to what other cities, other municipalities, other partnerships are responsible for. So have you updated those agreements at the same time you're creating new ones? Because that is where, the only way that we can use the system and transition folks from the Metro Mobility side to the mainline system, because it's gonna free up other folks that need the Metro Mobility side. The only way we can do that is to make sure that we hear the elements that we're talking about. Safety, lighting, receptacles, heat. We live in a climate where it's 7 months, it's cold. This year, we've gotten by easy, okay? But that's not gonna happen next year.
No, probably not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darrell. Did you wish
Thank
to
you.
respond?
Well, Chair
more of a
and
comment.
committee members, thank you. And I think that's a good topic to put in a workshop type format that was mentioned earlier, because as you're saying, it's this challenge. We need it out of reach, yet we need it within a good distance. I think that'd be a good topic just to workshop on. Thank you.
Thank you, Darrell. Patsy, and then Heidi, you'll take us home.
Now, just to let you, I am not able to be riding buses anymore, but I have been with people. I can do it. When I used to be coming in and out of downtown, in which you were speaking of reminds me very much of it. You're talking about placing your pads. When there are sites such as being in downtown, multiple buses, and it used to happen to me. I'm up there in the front, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, I'm just gonna say, bus 6 comes over here. Oh, but that's not my bus. Now, when my bus comes, it's second in line. They don't know about it, and I can't get to them. And what they were doing, usually, especially in downtown, they all lined up, 3, 4, 5 buses, and when one would get full, they would pull away. And what about all of us that are up at the front, especially people that are in a wheelchair that are waiting up at the pad? How do you handle all that when you got multiple buses?
Thank you, Patsy, for that. That comes up about twice a year in this committee. And it's called bus jumping, and they're not supposed to do it. They're supposed to pull up. Andy, did you want to talk about this?
Yeah, just with regard to bus jumping, I know that they are making some efforts recently to really focus on that. And I will say in my personal experience, at least downtown here and by my house, I've seen a dramatic decline in bus jumping, just dramatic. So if you want to bring that back to folks, it is very much appreciated.
Yeah, but thank you for revisiting it, because it's important.
Maybe not even necessarily bus jumping sometimes. It could be they thought they had all their people.
Well, anytime the bus does not pull all the way up to the sign and stop where they're supposed to, it's considered bus
That's
jumping,
why-
I think.
Yeah, that's why they're supposed to stop at that post, because even if they're two buses deep, they're not technically at their stop. The only time they're at their stop is when they stop at that bus stop, the post.
But conversation for another day, and every year, we'll keep on talking about it.
It is getting better though, so I do definitely want you to know that yes, it does get better, but in the suburbs and in high traffic times, I mean, people are people, they just do what they do and.
Yeah, we'll revisit that. Not technically a bus stop issue, that's a bus driver issue. Heidi, take it, or Doug, did you want to say something real quick about that?
Yeah.
I know you have thoughts on this.
Yeah, he's.
All right, I'll leave you alone. Heidi, go ahead.
My question is, over by the Green Line, the Central Station, there are some buses there. Are you making a new shelter? Because there was some new concrete stuff on the sidewalk. As I was trying to walk to the Green Line to order to go down into, St. Paul. And if I had a friend with a wheelchair, it was kind of hard. It's kind of like some new concrete stuff in the middle of the sidewalk. And I didn't know if it was new bus shelters or what it was, but it was kind of oddly put in a weird position because I had to figure out with my disability, because there wasn't very much room, to go around it just to get to the train. And I don't know if you can speak on that. And I know you've had toilets there. I know you've done some remodeling because people abuse it and, or because it gets like 3 or 4 buses there. And it just seemed all of a sudden there's this big concrete thing and I have no idea what the hell it is, excuse my language. But at the same time, I was trying to figure how to get around it appropriately, so I don't end up in the street.
Chair and committee member, thank you for that comment. I think what you're talking about is construction of a BRT platform or station where the gold line will go. I'm looking, and the B line. So I will bring the construction in the way concern back to the group that's managing the construction.
Oh, thank you, because it was just this big concrete thing out of nowhere, and it's like I had to figure out, okay, it's interesting. But I want to work with everyone because I don't think they realize tons of people gather down there and they don't share it. And all I wanted to do is get to the Green Line so I can get where I need to go. That's all I'm asking. I don't need it any more complicated. And because your road construction made it very complicated, St. Paul did. And then think about the pandemic, because that goes back to everybody wanting to get to a certain bus stop correctly. Because when the pandemic was going on, they had to park a certain way and everyone got in the back of the bus. But for people who had mobility problems, that back of the bus sometimes does not work with the disability, with the doors, how you get in, it's not wheelchair accessible, and they were parking in bad places. So if you're ever going to build new shelters, you have to think about, if we get another huge pandemic, how are you going to take care of the disabled population, because you did a poorly job. And felt like I wish I was never disabled in this pandemic, because you treated me like trash sometimes. And so please think about that when you're making the shelters. If you have to board the back of the bus or board a certain way or set the buses up a certain way, and you're demanding all the bus drivers to do that, but it's got to work with us too as we work with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heidi, for that.
That was the comment. The second comment I had was about the buses, when people go out the back door and you're putting your pad in. What about when people have to go out the back door of a bus, or especially the elongated buses? They're going out onto grass, snow.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever, There's not a pad if they're coming out of the back buses. And a lot of times people are coming out the back buses, back doors of the buses.
Thank you, Patsy.
Does that make sense?
Thank you, Heidi. We are at time. Thank you both very much for joining us. This was quite informative, and I'm excited to hear about that form more, or use that form more often.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Oh yeah, this was great. We went a little bit over. That was intentional. I do apologize to Julie and Michael. You do have 30 full minutes, I promise, to make time for you. Julie and Michael are both joining us online. Awesome. I hope you can stick around a little bit past your originally allotted agenda time, but if not, I do understand. Either way, I'm happy to still give you your full 30 minutes if you need it. But yes, so more bus stops this time. More bus stuff, but this time bus routes, not bus stops.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
All right, excellent. And I do have some slides to review. Is this Would you like me to share my screen, or is that handled on your end?
Yes, sure. Please do that. Were they shared out before? I think they were, yes. Yeah, okay, good.
They were, yes.
Good.
So I will do that now. And again, thank you for accommodating me as a virtual presenter. No problem time-wise. I have the rest of my afternoon pretty cleared out. So I'm going to introduce myself, and Julie, if since I know you're online too, maybe introduce yourself. My name is Michael Mechtenberg, Program Manager here at Metro Transit, and I've been working on different speed and reliability projects for the last 5 or 6 years.
Why are we making him so small?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Julie Martinez. I'm the new Community Outreach Coordinator on Doug's team, and also working on Better Bus Route 4. So this is, I'm new at Metro Transit. This is one of my first projects.
Welcome,
right.
Julie. It was a little quiet at first, Julie, just real quickly. It was a little quiet at first to hear you, but it got louder as you progressed on. So whatever you did at the end, keep on doing that so we can hear you.
Can we make
Okay,
them a
thank
little
you.
bigger so I have something to follow if I can't hear him very well?
So I've got about a dozen slides here, which takes, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and of course, be happy to take questions at the end.
Okay. Is there a way?
So today we are going to be talking about a Better Bus Route project, Route 4.
Oh, okay.
This may sound familiar to some of you in the group. I did present on a previous Better Bus Route project, Route 63, to this committee back in 2020. So if any of you were participants on the committee at that time, some of this might sound kind of familiar, but for all those that are new since then. So Better Bus Routes is an investment in local bus service. Really what we're trying to do with this program, well, let me back up. So we have a bus rapid transit program that has been very successful. You take the highest ridership routes, you invest in them. There are strategies to improve the speed of service, the reliability of service. And that's, again, a list of our highest ridership routes. At that time, when that program was taking off around 2018, 2019, I think we recognized that there was a gap in all of the other local routes that we operate. So we have this great program that focuses on our highest ridership routes, but what about the rest of the routes? What about all those maybe sort of second tier routes that still carry a lot of riders? They didn't have any program to focus on improvements there. And so that's what we're really trying to do here with Better Bus Routes is take some of the strategies that have been deployed with BRT and apply them to the rest of the local bus network. We do that at a little bit lower cost and a little bit faster than you would see on BRT. And sort of correspondingly, the benefits are a little bit less as well. So this program began as a pilot in 2018. It was Route 2, our first project. We learned a lot from that experience, and it is now, since then it's really continued to evolve as a more established program. Route 4 is our 6th project. Again, Route 63 was our 2nd project back in 2020, and we've basically been doing one route each year annually. That may change in the future. We may dial it up to more than one a year. So the project goals are to really improve the rider experience, and there's a couple of different ways of doing that. Better reliability and ideally faster service for riders, improving stop accessibility. So all of that stuff that Barry just mentioned is really folded into this program as well. So we partner with them very closely on bus stop design and accessibility improvements. And another thing we do is we try to simplify the service so that everyday riders can have an easier time navigating the network. So there's a certain amount of route simplification that can happen depending on the route. And then operator satisfaction. And what we're trying to do here is give operators a schedule that they can consistently meet and give them adequate recovery time at the end of the route so that they can get up, walk around, go to the bathroom, maybe have a lunch. And we're in part doing that, again, by having a more reliable schedule. I would also add operator restrooms is a big topic these days, and trying to identify and change routing to ensure that operators have a restroom facility at the end. So next few slides here are some of the key strategies that are pretty consistent across all the projects. There are other things that we do, and frankly, each of the routes that I've worked on so far has been a little bit different. Some emphasize route changes, others shelters. I would say these are the key themes though throughout. So the first one is stop consolidation. So moving from stopping every block to about every other block. So here we're proposing to move to quarter-mile stop spacing. You can see the graphic on the right there, since it sounds like some of you are familiar with BRT, comparing what sort of the middle ground that we're trying to achieve here between local bus routes, stop roughly every 1/8 of a mile, you know, in the core cities, whereas BRT stops about every 1/2 mile. We're trying to split the difference. We want to maintain accessibility while making a marginal improvement to the speed of service. So we look at things like existing stop spacing, ridership. Is this a transfer point? What are the adjacent land uses? Is there a facility or an organization nearby that really relies on that particular stop? And then who's riding? Looking at the different populations of riders on each given stop. You know, Barry and Sonja, I think, covered this one pretty well, but improving accessibility. And so Barry and her team review, prior to my work, they go out and audit all of the bus stops on the route that is being proposed for the next project. And we use that information to go through, we sort of filter it, and we say, okay, well, we're recommending this set of stops is going to be removed. Here's the remaining set, usually the majority of the stops. Which ones are not compliant? And then we go through a process with Barry and folks in our engineering group to design ADA pads. So you're seeing an ADA pad here that was part of that Route 63 project. It's a marginal improvement, but it does ensure, it does help to get increased accessibility at the stops. Now there are occasions, and I might have missed this as part of Barry's, I joined late, but that due to the constraints of the site, the roadway or what have you, it's not possible to make it fit the ADA compliance. And we'll do what we can. On those rare instances where it is not possible, then we would wait, and I think this was talked about, wait and work with the city or the county on the next roadway project that goes through and make the changes at that time. The county in particular has been doing a lot of work in Minneapolis, Hennepin County, I should say. And so this has provided a great opportunity for us to get out there and fix things that have been a problem for a while. Franklin Avenue on Route 2 is a key example of that. We've worked very closely with that team on ensuring stop accessibility. Okay, I digress. The third is bus shelters. So with the goal to place a shelter at all the stops that meet the boarding requirements. So I won't go into details about that. I think that was covered, but the goal here is really to focus on the single route and say, well, where on Route 4 are we at or close to the requirements for getting a shelter? And the pair of stops you see here are Route 2 project from back in 2018. And then the last one, which has been less, I would say, is maybe less prominent for the Route 4 project, is route simplification. So we have a lot of our local bus routes can be very complicated. The example I point to is Route 3. I don't know if any of you have ridden the 3 recently, but it had several different short lines. So where it ends short of the final destination, it had multiple branches and different patterns. It's very confusing. especially for a new rider to navigate this. So what we're trying to do is clean things up. A lot of these routes have kind of had changes sort of piled on over the years. And part of what we're doing is taking like, not quite a reset, but really thinking about how we can best use the trips that we have on a current route, or on an existing route. And, in this case, you see the graphic here sort of straightening it out, fewer short lines. So again, the Route 4 is relatively straightforward. We're actually not proposing any routing changes for this, but it has been certainly a case for other routes. So what we are proposing for Route 4 is, again, stop consolidation. So we've identified about 75 stops that we're recommending for removal. That sounds like a lot. That is a lot, but it's a very big route. And I was actually just looking at the numbers prior to this presentation. And even with removing these stops, we'll still continue to serve over 90%, actually it's like 94% of riders at their current stop, or like just across the street from their current stop. So you have a lot of stops that are pretty low volume. And, again, that maybe lessens the benefit. So you can't gain as much speed by eliminating those. But it does, I do think it maintains access for the vast majority of riders. We've identified about 14 bus stop locations that will be improving. Again, going back to those ADA pads and such. About 5 locations where we're adding shelters. But then no changes to frequency or route alignment. We had really hoped, I had really tried to get some additional service out there on the 4. It has, since COVID, ridership is down, but the trip count is also down. So it has fewer trips than it used to have. And I was hoping to get that back to closer to where it was in 2019. And, the constraint these days, and I'm sure you've heard this from others, is operators. So we have the funding to run more service, but we currently don't have the operators to do it. So this is on the short list of routes to make improvements to, but it just wasn't possible to coincide with this project. Taking a slight step back, thinking about Route 4, if you're familiar with this, there have been some projects that have affected it in the relatively recent past. In South Minneapolis, it had previously gone on Bryant Avenue. That was relocated over to Lyndale Avenue South. A pretty big change for the route. That was back, was maybe 2021, thereabouts. On the northeast side of the route, Johnson Street was reconstructed. So not a big segment, but about 4 or 5 blocks there between Lowry and 18th Ave. And then in downtown Minneapolis, Hennepin Avenue was reconstructed. Route 4 travels on Hennepin, of course. And so those are all new stops, and we're really happy with that design and how those look. Looking ahead at sort of related projects, we are working with the county, Hennepin County, on bus lanes for their Hennepin and First Ave Northeast project. So that is happening this year. They're adding bike lanes, and we were able to partner with them to add bus lanes as part of that redesign. So that'll be happening very soon. Very excited about that. Northeast Minneapolis, very congested corridor, so this is going to be a big benefit. Another county project, Lyndale Avenue South. I'll show you the county's doing a lot. Lyndale Avenue South, they're in the process of redesigning that street from about Franklin to 31st. So it's sort of like the Whittier uptown area of Lyndale. And we are part of that design team. Very much supporting transit improvements, transit advantages as part of that project. If you live in South Minneapolis or want more information, these are, you can, I guess if this is emailed out, those are links to both of the project websites. And the Lyndale Ave South project is really just getting going now. So there'll be opportunities for the public to weigh in on that. And then a little bit further down the road, bus rapid transit, Johnson, Lindale corridor, so Route 4, had been identified as a pretty high scoring project when they had done their evaluation a few years ago. It didn't make the short list at that time, but it is still on the list of upcoming projects. I don't have a specific year or timeline, but I know that it's a strong local route. So I think that will happen sort of in their next round of lettered routes, if that makes sense. So here's a picture of the project timeline. This, again, it's about a year-long cycle. So we started last year. There was internal conversations. We meet with the cities and the counties to kind of talk through these changes in our proposals. We are now in the public engagement phase. We are looking for feedback on the proposed changes. And we'll take that feedback. There's a survey that I don't know if it's part of this presentation. There is a survey that we'd love you to take. And we'll kind of digest all of that feedback and make a final recommendation, I'd say like sometime later in the spring, and then implement the changes in August. So it usually start around August, and then they are implemented in August for about that 1 year cycle. That is all I have. I will say, which I apologize is not in the presentation, but we're really leaning into outreach for this project. That Julie's leading those efforts. We have posted all the bus stops that we're proposing to eliminate. So that is really our main point of contact with riders. As you change stops, like the impact is fairly localized, right? So we really want to hear from Route 4 riders that would be impacted by any of these changes. So we post all the stops. We've got a website, which is right here. There's an online survey and a map, and there's a lot of other information. And again, we're about at the midpoint of our public engagement phase. So we're looking for feedback from the public and then from this committee as well. So I'll maybe stop there and ask if there are any questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I have a couple quick questions and then I'll go to members. I think Andy was the only one. Thank you both for doing this. So I think I know the answer to this, but I'm just curious. So the 75 bus stop removal, is that just strictly based on the usage data, or is there other stuff involved too?
Is that permanent?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members. We go through a process in conjunction with the city and county and other departments at Metro Transit. And ridership is a factor. Again, stop spacing is a factor. Often what you'll see on these local routes is, particularly those in the core cities, is that the street network itself is sort of designed around either quarter or half mile spacing. So you'll have these major intersections about every half mile. And once you get going, honestly, David, it's actually fairly straightforward. There are some exceptions if there's a school or other special use nearby. But you'll take like a key intersection and then build off of that. So, the same areas that are business nodes are also transfer points and high ridership stops. So it's fairly straightforward. Again, if you go to the website, there's a map that includes all of the stop changes. That was maybe a long-winded answer there. Sorry, David.
No, that does make sense. And just a quick follow-up on that. So say someone goes to the website and sees all the more detailed information of the changes to Route 4, and it's an individual who has a disability and maybe can't travel that extra quarter mile to the next bus stop. Is that something that you are taking into consideration on that form, in that survey, in terms of like, look, I won't be able to use this route anymore if this bus stop is removed?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members, that's exactly the kind of feedback that we want to hear. So there is a survey that with some sort of stock questions, and then you can, there's an open field. So if there was a specific stop that you had concerns about, that you wanted us to be aware of, that would be the best way to get back to us. We've also received comments through our regular customer relations department. And so those are coming in, and maybe to answer a question that I anticipate is, yes, we do make changes to the plan based on the feedback that we've received. We try to be somewhat mindful of what we're recommending initially. So I'm a little selective on what I'm even proposing to begin with, but yep, we'll get additional comments back. And I would note, and just maybe to clarify, while it would be a quarter mile between stops, like the additional distance would be an eighth of a mile. So maybe just a clarification.
Awesome, thank you. And then since we do have Julie in the room and your outreach, are you all doing like again, another question that I think I know the answer to, but I'm just curious to hear it from you all. Are you doing boots, wheels on the ground action, making sure that people who are using this route know that that form is there, or even just kind of observing, different times of the day who's on these buses and who's using these stops?
Yeah, definitely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Yes. I've been writing the for and talking to folks, and also just helping with the survey. It's set up through a QR code, which isn't always accessible for everybody. So I've had a few days out on the route, and then we're also meeting with a number of neighborhood associations along the route that are very heavily involved and are really pushing this information out to their neighbors, as well as MCTC, as that's kind of one of the hubs on the route that we get a lot of riders from MCTC. So they will also be sharing our information. And then, yeah, through this group, as well as Richfield Transportation Commission, that meeting's happening tonight. But yes, we are also on boots on the ground, just talking to folks, getting their feedback, as well as talking to operators.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, if I might, Mr. Chair. We've really leaned into engaging with operators on this project as well. So this particular route comes out of 3 different garages. So we've surveyed the operators to get their sort of initial input on what they think. We've done small group interviews. We met with some of the instructors, a dozen or so instructors at the Nicollet Garage. So it's been a really good feedback, and I do think really helps us ground some of our recommendations and kind of what they're seeing. I mean, they're really the main point of contact with a lot of riders, and so they've been able to provide some really great feedback.
Thank you, and I did meant to say one more thing. I did mean to say this before I asked questions, but I'm glad that we paired this with the bus stops, because there were 2 things you touched on, I think, that were important that came up in the previous discussion. Looking at what's on the route, who's being served by this, and taking that into consideration, and also the coordination with other jurisdictions too. Both of those questions did come up last time, so I'm glad that whereas this is just one, maybe a little more than one route per year, it sounds like you all can do this with it. It's good, I think, to increase efficiency with answering both those questions. Heidi and then Eric.
I know in the early 2000s or somewhere in the 2000s, they redid St. Paul, and that's why I can get off here now instead of further down. Oh, sorry. In the early 2000s, somewhere in the 2000s, they did rerouting of buses. And that's why I can now just walk across the street and come here for the meeting. But if you're going to do this, you have to think about how certain people with processing have to get to A to B, because like in West St. Paul, I take the 75 to go to Cubs and to Human Services so I can have meetings and have a life and have food, and that's West St. Paul. So, and those have already been cut back as much as it can be. I mean, you already killed Saturday and Sunday, so I only got the 68 to get out of West St. Paul, and you can't kill off the 62, or I'm not going to be able to have hardly any options. But you also got to make it so I can understand where to go and where to stand and how to do it, not just because you think it's appropriate and, not enough riders and stuff. Because when you rerouted it in St. Paul, I had to figure out how many streets to go down, which ways to go. So it's a learning curve. For certain disabilities, you're asking a lot for them, and then others can do very well. Or it's the equipment that they use to order to get where they're going, it becomes, because I don't know how you're setting this up. So I hope it's not so complicated that someone really does not like you guys anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heidi. I think that raises a good question, which is kind of other aspects of accessibility that might not necessarily be in the ADA, but are other best practices in our community, things like sight lines, things like continuity, all these other aspects. Thank you, Heidi, for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Eric, go ahead, and then Darrell, and then Andy.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would strongly echo what Chair Fenley was discussing about the elimination of 75 stops. We tend to focus on accessibility through barriers, ADA issues. This is actually the other side that we don't really focus on, the access aspect of it or the availability. And I understand and appreciate trying to make things more efficient. And obviously the goals that this program outlines, I think are great. Trying to balance the needs of the riders with the drivers, with, the environment that you're trying to create. That's great. But, thinking about removing that much access, it sounds like you do lead into your feedback, your surveys, your boots and wheels on the ground kind of comments. One really quick question is, if one person says no to the removal of that access or that bus stop, is it then that's all we needed was just one?
No.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, that's a great question, and I think one that there is not a very clear answer to. I had been doing service planning before this, and you're making route changes or changing the schedule, et cetera, all the time. And I guess my best way to respond to that is there is maybe the volume of comments we receive and then the intensity of the volumes we receive. So if you have one person that has a very intense concern, this person can no longer ride transit, or they can't reach their job, or they're worried about safety, that I would take seriously. If there were 50 people, or let's say 20 people that said, oh, this is less convenient for me, I would take that seriously. It really is it's kind of an art and not a science, and you sort of have to feel it out. Often I'll call those people back and kind of talk it through with them. We're not in a situation where every comment that I get is fixed. I mean, I don't want to imply that, and I think it would be disingenuous for me to say that. But we try to strike the right balance between still achieving our project goals while having genuine public engagement.
And I can definitely appreciate that. I can appreciate that. What I wanted to segue that into is thinking about the voices you don't hear. And I'm not talking about existing riders. I'm talking about the changing of access or the availability of these bus stop routes. When they're removed, it can prohibit people from moving to a certain area because they look at the transit that's available immediate to, either apartments, homes, residential spaces. So I don't know how best you could do it, but I hope you take that kind of thought to heart on looking and try to incorporate what kind of built environment we're creating and the unintended consequences of removing access or the availability of fixed transit to that surrounding community and what that could imply. Another question, if I may, is you had mentioned that you did 14 bus stop improvements. Is that linked to the Better Bus Stop program or the capital project? Is there any discussion between your groups? And are some of those 14 included in some of the metrics we received earlier at the previous presentation? Do you know?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, that's a great question. I kind of jumped on to this meeting about halfway through Barry's presentation, so I don't know exactly. I can say that Barry and for this project, Sonja, have been at the table throughout. So whether or not we're both taking credit for these stops, I guess I'm not really sure. But the two programs have a lot of synergy between them, and so she's been a great partner, and I think this has been a vehicle for us to identify additional stop locations. So in some regards, it's been beneficial for her, I think, too.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was hoping to hear is just the synergy because, we run a juggernaut here and it can be hard for all the people to talk to each other and coordinate and provide that collaboration. So I'm just glad those teams are talking as you kind of have two different programs going on. And this is more, maybe not accessibility related, just out of my own curiosity. I know that route planning can be extremely complicated. And on these consolidations, you're really not, at least in this proposed changes to Route 4, you're not looking to reroute anything or change the alignments, but some past projects have, and I'm assuming some of your future projects are looking at that. What type of innovation do you try to implement when you're doing your route programming? And I guess I could leave it at that. I can think of a couple examples of companies and or other very large cities that lean into very innovative approaches to optimizing in the initial implementation of a route, but then also when they're looking to build in efficiencies to their routing. Just curious what you might think of that.
Okay. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Maybe I'll just answer it in the best way that I can, which is if I'm in charge of one of these projects and recommending a routing change or alignment change, I take that pretty seriously because that is in many ways a greater impact to riders. If you're eliminating a branch or if you're going from 4th Street in downtown up to Washington, or, routing it via Washington. So that has a larger and more impactful change for folks. So we do take that more seriously. In those cases, there is sort of an additional layer of engagement with riders. The survey would also include questions about that. And, here again, based on that feedback, we've opted to keep branches. There are a lot of trade-offs. And this, unlike Better Bus Stops, I would say there are folks that as you're making these types of changes in Better Bus routes that are impacted. And, it's part of my job trying to weigh all these different concerns and provide service that's really the best for all riders. Maybe we can talk offline about what that really answered your question.
Sure.
I would say, generally speaking, route planning is very, very hands-on. So there's not there's different approaches of doing it, but each one takes a lot of engagement and thought about anytime you're making a change.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Eric. And you weren't in the room, but Barry did start to creep up behind you and then sat back down. So I think you answered the question that she was going to answer. Darrell, go ahead.
Is it Michael, right?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
Michael, sorry I came in late. I was doing something in the hall. More importantly, I looked at the bus stop here on the 21. It shows the 21 route. Yeah, and the 63 route. You're showcasing and highlighting an accessible pad there that looks like 5 foot by 8 foot, but yet it actually is adjacent right to the storm drain. Don't you think that might be a challenge or propose an issue in the wintertime or in the fall time? I mean, and my concern also with that is there's no sod on the other side. So if a wheelchair was to come out there and I have to turn around and accidentally their back wheel clip the edge there, that could propose an issue for them getting to that bus, especially if that bus wants to pull out and doesn't want to load that wheelchair. I mean, my thing is why would you build a bus stop next to a storm drain without making sure that the sod and stuff is put back when they put the pad in? I mean, because it looks like it's okay in the summertime, springtime, but in the fall and wintertime, I don't think it's gonna be as nice as you think it is. Does it make sense or not? I mean, I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, Mr. Chair, committee, so this is, I think, the image that you were referring to.
It is.
On the screen, and I'll just stop sharing. So this, as you can maybe see based on the sort of the flagging there, this was on the day of the pad being poured. So, and this is actually just around the corner from where I live. So I can promise you that there is grass where you see the dirt today. So it looks like any other bus stop these days. In terms of the sewer grate, that can be a factor. This
I know it's a
sign
factor in my neighborhood. I live in the suburbs, and a lot of times those sewer grates get clogged up with leaves. They get clogged up with anything else that my neighbors want to push down there, or that the kids want to kick into the street when they're waiting for the school bus. I mean, I just think it's really irresponsible to put pads next to like a storm drain or anything like that because of water runoff and debris that is going to get there.
Michael, you do have, I think, maybe some support in the room if you want. Hold on, Heidi, hold on. If you want, there's someone who might be able to speak to this, realizing that is a picture of an unfinished bus stop.
I do.
Yeah.
Well, it's unfinished to the point where he says it's finished now. He can't move the storm drain, correct? So the storm drain is still there, correct?
Well, that does sound like kind of maintenance issue too, and maybe some unavoidable stuff. We do have someone who can address it.
Okay.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we're finishing up.
Thanks.
Chair and committee members, Paul Lamb again with Engineering and Facilities. I guess regarding your first question about the dirt near the storm drain or the dirt near the concrete pad that was poured, we do have the standard with our specifications and with our construction staff that does need to be resodded or seeded. Afterwards, sometimes that'll be it'll occur in the fall, and then there'll be a requirement to follow up the following spring to make sure that grass actually takes hold and reduces that runoff and potential cloggage.
Thank you. I'm going to go, Heidi, we don't have time. I do apologize. I'm going to go to Andy, and then we have to move on with the agenda.
Just one quick request. Simplifying and streamlining are very attractive in theory, but I just want to call out that a lot of the short lines within the urban core, or at least a number of them, or branches, came about to better access, say, a disability dense facility, like a senior housing unit or a particular clinic or a public housing facility that might not justify all-day service right out in front of it, but that, maybe a couple of runs midday, serving through a tail or a short line really enhance accessibility for residents and make them capable of using public transit when they might not otherwise be. So again, totally not an issue for the 4, as you called out, but as you're looking at adopting this methodology for other routes within the urban core, please bear in mind why some of those short lines exist in the first place. And don't throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of cutting off that accessibility.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you both very much for coming. We appreciate it, and thank you for sticking around a little bit longer. All right.
Okay, happy to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you too, Julie, for joining us. Subcommittee reports. I don't think Ken is online, but if he is, please chime in. Otherwise,
He's usually on screen.
yeah, usually is, but I don't think he's with us today. Chris, do you have any updates on Green Line?
No report yet.
Awesome, thank you. And I know Darrell did share some stuff with Golden Purple. Do you have any updates on Golden Purple?
I don't have a Golden Line update, but the Purple Line update, I don't know if you noticed, there has been a extensive amount of work done on the on that project, and more importantly, I'll have a better update next month because I know I'm in 2 meetings with the Purple Line folks this week, the end of this week, tomorrow actually. So, and then the Gold Line, they have been doing construction, but usually that hasn't been a great impact to this committee because I noticed that construction usually happens on late Friday night, and they're done and they finish up by Monday morning or Sunday night before work. So I'll keep you updated as it gets closer to those things. But yeah, if you need a better update, I have sent it out in the minutes or asked it to be sent out in the minutes. I know the last couple times it has not been sent out, so maybe we'll do that again. We'll start doing that, and then yeah, I can give a better update next time.
Thank you, Darrell. And I just realized that I skipped my agenda item. So Disability Day at the Capitol it's at the end of this month, so March 27th. It begins at 9:30. There's a rally at 11, and I can share all this information via email if you want. This is not TAAC specific. It's a Minnesota Consortium for Citizens with Disabilities that puts it on, but you all are welcome to go and meet with your legislators.
Prior to a webinar, I believe it's a webinar, I signed up for it. It's kind of a 101 to what the event is, the participation, the schedule. So I strongly suggest at a minimum, we all kind of try to sign up for that, or I'd recommend the committee members to do so. Even if you're not going to attend, it kind of can, get the juices flowing for attending maybe the next year, or, might pique your interest even further if you're not thinking of attending. So, yeah, I'd promote that webinar at least. And then just for everybody, I do plan on attending, so I hope to see you guys there too.
And we're trying to
Thank you,
bring the numbers back up so we can, because the pandemic and certain things kind of brought it down.
Yes, we do want to get more people to attend. Any other questions or comments on Disability Day at the Capitol? Awesome. Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment at this moment in time? No members of the public? Okay. Committee members. Go ahead, Heidi.
And we got the person in the audience, the head of Metro Mobility. But I've been taking the taxi lately, and I've noticed, and my friends have noticed this, that the Metro Mobility actual vehicles are a lot cleaner than the taxi companies. And also the other thing is, it's been brought up, is, and he's from a different location, he got the same thing I am. They're on their cell phone or some kind of headset kind of thing, and they're talking a lot when they're driving in their language. And so we've noticed that, and there are some really good drivers, so I don't want to knock it, but I did exactly what Metro Mobility told me to do, and just so you know, they're not taking it seriously, because a month later, I got the guy again, and his vehicle is horribly disgusting. If you had really nice clothes and you're going to church, or if you're going to an event, you wouldn't want to sit in that vehicle, and he's not wearing his seatbelt because the bell keeps going off. So there are some dangerous things, and also it depends on who you talk to, because they said I need to report if they overcharge me, when it really is a $5 thing. So we are doing it correctly. It just depends on who answers that phone, because my friend went for a $5 ride there and got charged $6 going back, and it's the same. And then I also figured out something is when you Google it, sometimes there might be a ride where it can be a 15 or a 20-minute ride. It just depends on which one they decide to pick. And that is something you can't always control, but for certain things, they are getting, charged for things they're not supposed to be extra, and from what I was told, and I told my friend, is the nice lady said, you need to report that to us, but it really gets down to who's working that night or day or evening or morning, and really they take it seriously.
Thank you, Heidi. I think your friend's advice to report it to the cab company.
No, I have, and I reported it to both ends, and it hasn't really been resolved, so that's why I'm glad you're listening.
Thank you, Heidi, for that. Do any other members have comments at this time? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.